Narayanam namaskritam naram chaiva narottamam devim sarasatim vyasam tato jayaririt nashna prayashu bhadresu nityam bhagavata sevya bhagavatamashaki bhaktir bhavati naistiki nigama garitam param shukamakaram rita dravisamitam pivata bhagatam rashamariyam ahoraho rishikopavakaham Krishna sadam bhagate gambini kshana karunasta dushamasha paranako dunoditam Tramapiadavishuddha Vishuddham Vibhusam Helpiadana Vidam Viduksaram Parakyahidoharam Hadanam Shanklesham Nirvadam Usani Nyanyataham. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinu Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostatum Jayatam Sadato Pangor Mama Midir Madirgati Matsavasha Padam Boja Radhanamada Namo Sriman Rasa Rasadam Vamsi Vada Karsan Vinaya Gopinas Sriya Naham Divyad Brindaranya Kapadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Shima Sanisto Sri Sri Radha Shila Govindadeva Prastadavi Sevamanu Shmarami Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Taya Cha Jigaditaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Durgame Padmi Anda Shaskara Padya Gira Shaki Bhashana Santu Santu Vadam Vadam Mukamakavi Pakari Anshavanish Magani Panga Gilanga and the Dekagari Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Dev Maheshwara Guru Shaksha Parabrahma Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Om Aganati Mananda Shaganangana Sarakya Chaksurun Minitam Yana Tajmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yana Bhutare Swayam Rupa Karamayam Darati Swaparantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Siyata Parakamanam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Sri Rupam Sagaradam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Stam Sadevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Sta Namaham Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pasaya Bhutare Simati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamani Namaste Sarasati Devi Gauravani Pachadini Nirvishes Sanivadi Paskita Desadani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Good morning, John and Brent on with me, and also Rob's asking to come into the room. Good morning, Rob. I assume you got back home last night all right. Is that true? All right. Okay, Haribo. Thanks for jumping on board. Those who join us early on Monday morning, they get the latest news, which is that um, we've been approached. No guarantees, but we're being considered for the Sadasang retreat Memorial Day weekend in May. That's an annual event. It was suspended for a couple of years during COVID, and they had it in North Carolina. Had a retreat run by the Art of Living Center. It attracts 2,000 devotees, the best kirtan leaders, Bhattahari, Madhava, Satchidananda Swami, Indradumna Swami. They're part of the kirtan leadership there. And it's just kirtan. It's a long weekend, Memorial Day week, this kirtan. So we were approached as a possible venue. 700 motels rooms are needed in Utah Valley, and we found actually the person, the linchpin, who can get those for us. We don't know what the rates are going to be because it's Memorial Day weekend, and motel occupancy is about 100%. So whether we can get the discounted rates that would be ideal remains to be seen. But I just had to share this with you because to be even considered as a venue for the Sadhusanga retreat it's such an honor, such an honor. And even if it should not be held in Spanish Fork for one reason or another, I would advise all aspiring devotees to put it on their calendar. May 27th, 28th, 29th, 2022, wherever it may be. There's no better place that you could be on that weekend than associating with 2,000 devotees, some of the best kirtan leaders in the world. Excellent prasadam as well. To put that on your calendar. Another development that I feel like impelled to share with you is that Jake Emlyn, who is a Krishna rap star from England, whom I've admired for some time, has agreed to come for the Festival of Colors in March 26th, 27th. He's going to bring a DJ with him. So we're very, very excited about having Jake Emlyn here in the continental USA to participate in the Festival of Colors. This is one of his songs. I'll share it with you. I don't have the music for it, but here are the lyrics anyway, just to give you an idea of his talent. And of course, with that English accent, Americans go crazy over an English accent. That's a known fact. Anjali, are you there? I'm just sharing with everybody the news that Jake Emlyn has agreed to come over for our Festival of Colors in March. And he's going to bring, I think, a DJ named Sam with him. Anjali is in touch with Jake. They're friends. And Anjali herself is a great songstress. She has a great kirtan voice, and she's going to work out some sort of a routine so they can all collaborate here on the stage in Spanish Fort, Utah, March 26th and 27th. So here's one of Jake's songs, okay? It's called Consider the Soul. You're not this body you're living in, your eternal spirit soul, so where shall I begin? Every single living entity, including you, is immortal. It's the inner self which is true, the outer body misty like morning dew, musty and crusty after youth passes, dust to dust, earth to earth, ashes to ashes. Every 7 years, each cell is replaced. The old body's been displaced, erased, effaced. Every cell is changing. We're always reincarnating. The question remains, who are you? What can you do to break the chains of transmigration, save the soul from material contamination? You can ignore the concept and hit the exit by the quickest route, or you can listen to our lyrics and get a vision of the truth. Does your life have meaning? You're trying to escape. Are you just breathing and taking up space? Most people are not open. They just do not want to know. The question I propose to you from me is, do you have the eyes to see? The soul is unborn and never grows old. You can tell by the way that we try to conform to a limited life. Death is so painful because we're not supposed to die. Spirit soul is eternal. We know it inside. Like, why should I change my body again? That's the real meaning of human sense. If I'm eternal, why all the external posturing and pretense? My time would be better spent in preventing rebirth, rising high into the spiritual sky. That's the beginning of human life, a special chance to get free from the cycle of birth and death which no one survives. Time to realize your eternal state and attain your original spiritual body one day. We have free will to make our own decisions. We have to face the reactions to the way we've been living. Sense enjoyment is fleeting and shabby. We do it over and over and never makes us happy. Not knowing our true nature, we're trying to cater to all this temporary stuff, but it's never enough. We cage ourselves into this prison, numb our consciousness to this crummy position. We allow the media to condition us, so we shop for additions to this body, which we are not. Ignorance causes dissatisfaction in the soul. We can't imagine why we're not happy. Then we grow old. We get all crabby and go cold. It's hard to turn back. Once your soul's been sold, if you don't know why you're here, be honest, you don't. Maybe you could find out if you considered the soul. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, Jake Emlyn, and we're both agreed. I'm agreed to bring him here and pay his ticket, and he's agreed to come. So, hubba, 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 hubba. Another significant development today is that we're moving to another verse. We spent all of the sessions last week on the 30th verse in the 5th chapter of the first canto Triumviragatam. So we're starting now with part 1, the 31st verse. Are you ready? Set? Here we go, exploding out of the starting blocks. Yanaya Baham Bhagavato Vasudevasya Vedasha Mayana Bhavam Abhijam Yena Gajanti Tatparam. Narada Muni is speaking. By that confidential knowledge, which he received from the Bhaktivedantas, I could understand clearly the influence of the energies of Lord Sri Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything, by knowing that one can return to him and personally meet him. In the purport, Prabhupada starts out by saying, by devotional service or by the most confidential knowledge, one can understand very easily how the different energies of the Lord are working. We always say back to Godhead. Someone asked Prabhupada, why don't we say back to God? Because the Godhead includes the energies of the Lord. Nowhere do we find a powerful, influential person alone. If they're going from place A to place B, they're traveling with an entourage, and the size of that entourage is an indication of their power and their influence. They're going to have secretaries, they're going to have researchers, they're going to have security people, they're going to have media. all kinds of people are going to surround the most powerful person. Never to be found alone or in a vacuum. Similarly, God is the most powerful. Parasya Shaktir Vibhidaya Shabhavaka Bala Jnana Kriya. It is said that he is that person than whom no one is greater than equal. There's no one more influential than the Lord. So the last thing we would expect is to see the Lord all by his lonesome. So we say back to Godhead, which encompasses the whole picture. It's not complete to just think of the energetic source, but you have to think of the energies which come from that energetic source. I don't think anybody can think of just the sun without including in that thought process the sunshine. I don't think anyone can think of the sunshine without thinking of the sun. They come together. You cannot separate them. You didn't have the sun before the sunshine. You didn't have sunshine before the sun. They're simultaneously one, and they're simultaneously different. So God is Mayatadamidam sarvam jagadavyakta matstani sarvutin nachaham sheshubhasa. Everything is stani. Everything is resting on the Lord, but not directly. He has nothing to do with this material nature. He's completely pure and spiritual, remote and apart from this material world. And yet at the same time, he's one with this material world. He's not one, and he is one. This is not necessarily comprehensible by our tiny pea-like intellects, but he is separate and distinct, pure, and far removed from this material world. At the same time, he is non-different from this material world through the diffusion of his separated inner Bina Prakriti. These are his energies. They have no other source than him, but they're separated from him. Krishna is all spirit. His spirit inside, spirit outside. His body is the source from which everything comes. It is possessed of unlimited power, knowledge, bliss, and eternity. But at the same time, that one all-powerful person, the way that we can say God is all-powerful and all-knowing is that he's not just separate. He's not just out there and not here. He's out there, but inconceivably, simultaneously, he's here. But he's here through his energies, and not necessarily is he personally here. And particularly this material world is a manifestation of his inferior energies. The spiritual world is comprised of his superior energies, that he's eternal, ever-existing, self-effulgent. There's no need of natadba, sitesha, shashanka, no need of sunlight, moonlight, electricity. It's a self-effulgent spiritual realm. But the material world is dark by nature. Om asato mad sadgami om tamasho mad jyotirgami om maritam madamitam ganomar. In the spiritual world, there's no death. In the material world, there's death. In the spiritual world, everything is light. In the material world, everything is darkness. In the spiritual world, everything is full of knowledge. In the material world, everything is full of ignorance. That's why we have to go to school for so many years. And even those who have graduated from school, who have postgraduate degrees, MAs and PhDs, if they want to be the best in their particular field, they continue going and studying. I have my annual doctor's appointment coming up. I think it's on the 16th. And it's a good guy, Jeffrey Ogden up in Orem. We chat. And I said, we talk about hobbies. He likes to exercise and jog and on. We talk about how we use our mornings. I use my mornings chanting mantras, chanting slokas, sharing knowledge with you all. And he likes to spend his mornings reading medical journals. That means we're always in ignorance. We're always learning. We're always trying to keep the ignorance at bay. Einstein said, we don't know anything, otherwise we wouldn't call it research. So this material world is one with God in the sense that it's his separated energies. It's not the same nature. It's not the same categories as spiritual energies. So this is described in the 8th verse of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Aham sarvasya prabhavo matasavam pravartate. Iti madhva bhajandyam buddha bhava. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. Everything comes from me. It is me, but it's not me. It is me in the sense that it comes from me, but at the same time, I am a distinct, separate, remote living being. Mata sarvam pavartate. And again, there are two types of energies. There's the spiritual energy, which comprises the spiritual, eternal, self-effulgent world. And then there's the material energy. And in the spiritual energy reside the nitya siddhis. Doimo saruto nadhe, tsara tsara, sarva savanabu, kudastos sara ujate. Krishna describes the eternally liberated souls and the eternally conditioned souls. The eternally liberated souls are in the spiritual world, engaged 10% in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord and his devotees. The Nityabhadas, the eternally conditioned souls, have to enter into this dark, ignorant, temporary material world to play out their desires to be independent from the Lord. So both worlds, both categories of energies have as their origin none other than Krishna. And I'm going to share with you the Narayan Upanishad. Basically, it says that everything comes from Narayan. Everything comes from Krishna. Even Vishnu himself comes from Krishna in his Narayan expansion form. Shiva, Rudra comes from Narayan. Brahma comes from Narayan. The Prajapatis come from Narayana. Indra comes from Narayana. There isn't anything in this material world, no matter how powerful, which does not have as its source Narayan. And therefore, this is often chanted to remind us that there is one God. He's all-powerful. He's omniscient. He's at the one and the same time separate. And he's also pervades and supports this entire material creation. Just like air supports the cloud, you don't see the air, but you know the air is there because of the movement of the cloud. Similarly, you don't see God, but he's there in his invisible form, pervading and supporting everything. So here's a Narayana Upanishad. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Vunatu Saha Viryam Karvavahe Tejashvi Navavidam Ashtumi Bashvarahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And if you know that everything is maintained by our loving Father Narayan, and if you put him first place in your life, you'll always be in the palm of his hand. Everything that happens to you will happen for a reason. Then you can feel Shanti, 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 even in the midst of the most turbulent sort of circumstances. Om Mata Parusho Havai Narayana Kamayata Praja Sujayati Narayana Panujayate Mana Sarvendriya Chikam Prithivi Vishvashadari Narayana Brahmajayate Narayana Drujayate Narayana Aditya Jayate Narayana Prajapati Prajayate Narayana Dudashaditya Ruja Vishava Sarvani Chakshandam Shi Narayana Subhadhyate Narayana Pavartate Narayana Padiyate Omata Nityo Narayana Brahma Narayan Shivascha Narayana Sakruscha Narayana Dhaja Pritavyam Narayanam Kalasha Narayanam Idasha Narayanam Nurdvasha Narayanam Adasha Narayanam Antavahish Narayanam Narayana Vigam Sarvam Yakshabam Yakshabhavyam Nishkanako Naranjano Nvikapa Shudadeko Eko Narayana Dutiya Shikashid Saivam Viganam. Those last little bit, it said Narayan is up, Narayan is down, Narayan is outside, Narayan is inside. There isn't anything in which Narayan is not permeating. And those who realize this, who live according to this recollection, who keep their consciousness above the water, so to speak, they live in a liberated state of mind, even in this life. In the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, 7th verse, in the purport, Prabhupada says, in the liberated state, in the state of Krishna consciousness, Janma Karma Vedibhyam, Krishna assures us that if you take the trouble to learn the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and activities under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, Nyakyakam Neti Mamiti, when you leave this present body, you'll not take another material body. That means that even in this body, those who are engaged in devotional service are totally transcendental to the material modes of material nature. As soon as you forget your eternal constitutional position as a service to the Lord, then the hard struggle for material existence begins. If you're engaged in devotional service, you're fulfilling the purpose for which you're created. So everything tends to support you. Blessings chase you down. You don't have to engage in huge separatistic endeavors to maintain your house, to pay a mortgage, to provide for yourself. If you do the greatest thing, then all the other things will automatically be provided. Nitya nityanam chetanam chetanam ekayo vedadakayo. I mean, look around you. Even those who are not engaged in devotional service are provided for. Every living being has shelter, has food. Even those who are atheists, even those who decry God himself. But without God consciousness, every living being, even the demigods without exception, if and when they forget God, they enter into a hard struggle. Mamaivam sajive loke jiva bhutasana manasasthanini prakriti stani karsati. Krishna claims us as his own. He offers us the protection of an all-loving, all-powerful Father. And if you step into that, you don't have any problems in life. There's nothing that can challenge you, nothing that can come against you that's bigger than God. But you have to accept his claim of you as his part and parcel. Right now in Utah, there are billboards all over the freeway. I suppose the government of Utah is required by law to advertise unclaimed money. So there's these big billboards where you go. It says your cash is waiting. It says 1 in 5 Utahns get money back, and it gives a website. You can go and see if there's money that unknown to you belongs to you. But you have to claim it. It's not going to do you any good if you don't go to the website, put in your name, your specifics, your social security number, and then check it out. If you don't do that, you may have $1 million with your name on it, but it's not going to do you a bit of good. You have to claim it. So Krishna says, Mamaivam sajiva loka jiva bhuta sanatanam. He's eternal, he's full of bliss, he's full of knowledge. He created us in his own image. So we're made of really, really good stuff, as Jai Krishna likes to say. We existed before the universe, we'll continue to exist after the universe. We don't have to submit to this conditioned state of birth, death, disease, and old age. We don't have to assume a dull, dead, painful material body. We have our own original, pain-free, ever-existing spiritual bodies, which are composed of bliss and knowledge. So all we have to, but none of that does us any good if we don't claim it. If we forget about from where we come and whose we are, and the hard struggle, first of all, in forgetfulness of God, because we're not engaged in God's service, we're engaged in promoting ourselves, we generate these material senses for material engagement. Were we to serve the Lord, we would generate spiritual senses for spiritual engagement, but unfortunately we missed out on that somehow or other. So now we're generating material senses, and with the interaction of the senses, we become attached. It says, Naraka pi deham vai, Naraka pi deham vai, napuvam syakavini, Naraka navitatam, devo maya vimohita. Vimohita means illusion, a kind of a madness. When we're cast as eternal spirit souls, part and parcel of the Lord, full of light and luminosity and knowledge, some or other, we are cast down into this material world. It is a far inferior realm to the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, there's no difficulty, there's no worries, mate. There's no struggle for existence. But all of that is present in spades in the material world. But the trick is that because the material world is part of God's illusory energy, we quickly become attached. We find our little niche. We get comfortable, we get into a routine, and then we're loath to change it, even for going back home, back to Godhead. You probably heard the story of Indra. Indra was cursed. Indra is always in anxiety. He's a devotee, but he's a mixed devotee. He's not constantly in remembrance of the patronage and protection of the Lord. Oftentimes he gets off track. And when he gets off track, he inevitably incurs a curse for some sort of misdeed or other. One time he was cursed to become a pig. So he was thrown from the heavenly planets where there are apsaras, angelic dancing girls, and there are gardens, and every wonderful thing, into the mud to take birth as a pig, a male hog. In that lifetime, he got a female, and then he had babies, and he was thinking of himself as a sort of a pig patriarch there, getting used to the routine and settle into it. So when messengers came and said, you're actually Indra, the king of heaven, you're only here temporarily because of a curse, so mount our chariot and we'll take you back to heaven. And Indra was shocked. He said, how can I do that? I have my responsibilities. I have my wife. I have my little piglets. I can't do that. So the problem is that once we contact this material nature, it has its way of covering us in illusion and making us think that we're well situated. We put death aside. We put death out of our thoughts. We think that as everything is now, it will continue to be, and yet that is vimohita. Deva, Maya, vimohita. It's a very, very strong illusion, because if there's one thing that can be said about this material world, is nothing stays the same. Tu kali mashashvata. Is this material world, although we're thinking I'm stable, this is my routine, as it is now, it will always be this way. Nothing can be further from the truth. There's nothing more certain about this material world than that everything is changing. Take this body, for instance. Every 7 to 10 years, all the cells of this body die and are replaced by new ones. Do you have any idea how many cells are in this body? I don't. But I'm sure it's uncountable number of cells. So how many cells are changing every single day in a single 24-hour period? How many cells are dying and replaced by new cells? It must be in the hundreds of thousands. So we're right in the middle, as an eternal spirit soul, we're sitting right in the middle of this. It's like a horror show. It's like a Halloween deal, where this body is changing. There's cells dying and being sloughed off. Everybody gets up in the morning. First thing you do is take a shower. You just feel yucky. Not only is that taste in your mouth, but it's in one form or another that same thing. It's all over your body. There's dead cells, and you have to take a shower in the morning to wash all those dead cells off. So there's a tremendous change. It's not necessarily visible. There's a verse, Tasya Tasya Janonanum Nayam Kalyamanam Bimaram Vairi. Says the clouds are just wafting along. There's mother cloud, there's daddy cloud, there's a couple little baby clouds. And they're feeling good, looking good, everything's good. It's a nice sunny day down there on earth, everything's green fields and cows. And yet, somehow or other, those clouds are separated. Oh, my baby, come back. Why are you floating off there? Daddy, please. They don't know what's going on. They can't see the power which causes them to drift apart and ultimately dissipate. But it is certainly bigger than they are. They cannot do anything about it. 1 minute they're thinking, oh yeah, we're clumped together. We're one family, a nuclear family. There's mom, dad, a couple of kid clouds and all. But over the course of time, over the course of all-powerful time, the wind or the movement of the air not only separates the clouds, but it also causes them to disappear. They eventually get more and more wispy and more insubstantial, and eventually they're no longer identifiable as a cloud. Well, this is the material world. In the spiritual world, nothing changes in that sense. There's no loss, there's no distance, there's no separation. If you love Krishna and you love the devotees, you get to deepen that love, work on that love, enrich that love forever without any limitations and without any restrictions of time and space. But in this material world, it's as if we're bound up, shackled by the chains of birth, death, disease, and old age. Our connection with this material world all begins from the false ego, ahankara vimudatma. We are bewildered. There's a sense of I being separate from the Lord. And this sense of false ego, we have a real ego, which is Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, eternal servant of Krishna. But when we deviate from that and misuse our free will, then the false ego arises, which perceives our interests as being separate from the interests of the Lord. And we see our interests separate from the Lord in three categories: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Urdvam gatanti sabbhisha madhya jasanti rajasha jigani guna britisho adho patanti tamasha. If we see our interests as separate from the Lord in the mode of goodness, then we're attracted to philosophy, poetry, nonviolence, dance, creativity, peacefulness, serenity. And those are all good. But if they're ideals in and of themselves, they shroud us in forgetfulness of the Lord. So those living entities who are shrouded by the mode of goodness live in the heavenly planets for the most part. Those living entities shrouded in the mode of passion, which is intense competition, striving for more and more and more. Cities are in the mode of passion. Human civilizations, which rise and fall in the mode of passion. Then we take birth in these middle planets, the earth planets. And if you perceive your interests separate from the Lord in terms of alcohol and intoxication, sleeping and laziness, then you fall into the mode of, then you're bound up by the ropes in the mode of ignorance, and you have to live in the lower species of life. So in this way, we begin serving material energy instead of serving the Lord, who's so appreciative and so grateful for even the smallest service that we do. He always rewards his devotees, maybe not right away or not in the way that we expect it, but he sees all of your sacrifices. He sees your good attitude. He sees that every time you pick up your beads and you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and favors will chase you down. Your day will come, your season will come. But missing that, we begin serving material energy. And no matter how much you serve material energy, you'll never get a word of thanks. You'll never get a reward. The seeds you plant today are not going to give you more favor, more joy, more happiness in the future. They're going to give you more misery, more suffering, more frustration, and more agitation. We just get dug in more and more and more and more and more and more. And that's why Krishna said, as I've mentioned before, Joy mo purusha lake chara 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 sarvanabhuti kudasto sarva. There are two types of living beings. We're all created equal, but according to the choices that we make and the exercise of our free will, there are those who are eternally liberated, who have no worries whatsoever. And then there are those who are eternally bound up. There are the fallible and the infallible. And the fallible end up in material bodies, which are constantly changing. Manashast indriyani. They have a constant struggle with the five senses and the mind. In the old days, men used to have more than one wife. So let's say you have 6 wives. So every wife wants the husband and doesn't want the other wives, doesn't want the husband to share his time with the other wives. So they're always fighting. They're always competing with each other for the attention of the husband. And for the husband, there's no peace whatsoever. So one whose senses are uncontrolled, who's in a material body, he has 6 co-wives, so to speak. There's hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, and feeling, seeing, and they're all competing to see something nice, to hear something nice, to taste something nice, to touch something nice, to smell something nice. And then there's the mind. So without Krishna consciousness, one's living being torn in 6 different directions, so to speak, by 6 co-wives. And one can never find a niche. One can never find solidarity, stita. Everything is always constant. One has to always be adjusting according to the changing circumstances. Everything in this material world undergoes 6 basic changes. These are described by Prahlad Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmada sadimevava dristadaya shanityanam plavanam yavrikshasha kalaneshwari mortanam. Kalaneshwar, Kala means time. In her unseen form, just like the air, unseen, causes the breakup, the separation, ultimately breakup and death of clouds. So similarly, in her unseen form, Kalaneshwari Mortina, she causes the breakup and the death of all living beings in 6 phases. First we come into being, isn't it? Like a cloud. A cloud comes into being. A cloud has a birth, rather. And of course, the precipitation is there, but when it condenses, then it becomes visible as a cloud. So it's a birth, sort of speaking. And then it grows. It may attract other drops of condensation, and the cloud may get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it reproduces. It splits off. And then you have mother cloud, you have baby clouds. And that endures for some time. As long as the wind is calm and not turbulent, those clouds can spend some time together, half a day or 3/4 of a day. However, inevitably the wind kicks up, and then you have finally dwindling. The clouds separate, and they themselves dwindle, and then finally vanishing. So Janmari Sad Eme, there's 6 changes: birth, growth, duration, reproduction, dwindling, and vanishing. We see that even in the clouds, what to speak of the living beings. And that is all changing constantly because of the effect of the Lord in Kalaneshwara Mortina, in his invisible form of time. Now, in distinction of this, in the spiritual world, the body doesn't change. In the spiritual world, there is no birth, there's no death, there's no disease, there's no old age. The living beings, the infallible living beings in the spiritual world, have achieved oneness with the Lord. As soon as we come into contact with matter, we separate from the Lord. But as soon as we begin to remember the Lord by chanting his holy names under the guidance of a realized soul, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, we realize our oneness with the Lord. Doesn't mean we become the Lord, but we realize that we have the same qualities as the Lord. Just like gold items, like a gold ring or a gold earring, they have the same value as the gold mine, not to the same quantity, but there's a oneness there between the trinkets and items and decorations and ornaments of gold and the gold mine itself. But you have to practice Krishna consciousness in order to be aware of your oneness with God. You can't enter into the kingdom of God, which is pure light, pure bliss, and pure knowledge, dragging your material baggage with you, your sense of false ego, your separate agenda. You have to divest yourself of all those material attachments. And nobody can do that for you better than the spiritual master. The spiritual master will train you to replace your inferior material attachments, which are entangling, through which you have to constantly struggle for material existence. There's unending change and mutation and adaptation, anxiety, stress, hypertension, ultimately dissipation, death, and then rebirth. The spiritual master trains you to give up all that garbage so that the light of transcendental knowledge manifests itself in your heart and in your brain. You burn off all the unwanted dark things. Doing this, it doesn't matter how long you've been in the material world, it doesn't matter how many hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of previous incarnations you have. The process of linking up to the Lord through the bona fide spiritual master and honoring him with your senses is so powerful that anybody is guaranteed in the very near future to go back home, back to God. In the 72nd verse of the 2nd chapter, Krishna says, Esha Brahma Sita Bharta Nebam Brahmastidva Shamadika Brahma Nirvanam Richati. Esha Brahma says you have to merge into Brahman. That doesn't mean that you become one, that you become undifferentiated with God. It doesn't mean that you become God. But it means Brahmarpanam Brahmahabir Brahmagna Brahmana Brahmaiva Tandaga Brahmaga, that through training and through the awakening of spiritual consciousness, you learn how to dovetail your everyday activities with the service of the Lord. That is entering into Brahman. It's not doing no work, lighting no fire. Na niragnira chakriya. Just the opposite. It is continuing to work, but not working self-centeredly, working God-centeredly. Kama prema donakarivana loat ayam yachirishuri says iron and gold are both metals. They have that in common. But gold is so much more valuable. So there's work and then there's work. There's work under the impression of the false ego, which is like iron. And then you take that same work and you transform it in Krishna consciousness, And then it's like gold. It's so valuable, in fact, that it will purchase you your ticket back to home, back to Godhead. You will enter into Brahman, which does not mean that you will lose your individual identity. It does not mean that you will merge and become undifferentiated or one with God. It simply means that you will serve as a part and parcel of the Lord. This, no matter how long we've been in this material world, it can happen within a moment. Someone asked Prabhupada once, how long does it take to become Krishna conscious? Prabhupada looked at him kind of curiously, and he said, within a second. Within a second, you just have to evoke full surrender and full consciousness of God. Of course, to come to that point of sincerity and complete surrender may take some time, but it has been achieved by great souls in the past. In the 9th canto, 9th chapter, 42nd verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have one such instance. Yodi virartito dadyabadi yodi dirabhortamaya gatpita shaparam shatadevaram. The example is Mars Kadbanga. He was immortal, but he was so powerful that in one of their wars with the demons, the demigods asked Mars Kadbanga if he would join their forces in defeating the inhabitants of the lower planets. Mars Kadbanga joined in the fight of the demigods. Now, of course, acting on that level, time passed very quickly for him. He was only a mortal. He only had a normal lifespan. But once you're in the arena, the altitude of the demigods, time is calculated differently. So Mars Kadbanga fought for many years, fighting the demons, helping the demigods out, and the demons were defeated. The war was over, and the demigods were so pleased. They could not have bested the demons without the help of Mars Kadbanga. So they asked him, we'll give you anything you want. Girls, wives, wealth, palaces. There's nothing that we won't give you out of gratitude. Mars Kadbanga had a history of Krishna consciousness. So he only had one request. He said, tell me how much longer I have to live. He had a sense that having fought in the upper realms of the demigods, that the sands of his life had run out very, very quickly. Demigods themselves had hundreds of thousands of years yet to live, but Mars Kadbanga felt that that was not the case with him. And indeed, they told him that you only have a minute to live. So then he evoked. He couldn't have evoked it if it was not there originally. If he didn't have all that in his bank account, he couldn't have brought it up at the critical moment. It's not that you can do anything and then evoke Krishna consciousness at the time of death. You could only evoke Krishna consciousness at the time of death as a result of a lifetime of service and hankering. And so, Mars Kadbanga Yodi Vira Chidadhyatya Vadi Yodi Muhurta Mayor Gatpita. Muhurta means just a moment. Learning that he only had a moment left, that the final change called death was imminent, it was about to take place. He absorbed his thought in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and even within a second, he went back to home, back to Godhead. Instantly, as soon as his soul left this current body, he found himself in the association of the Supreme Lord with his Siddhaswarup, his fully developed spiritual body in the service of the Lord. Sometimes we get asked the question, do you guys believe in nirvana? We believe that nirvana means you end material life. For a Buddhist, nirvana means it's void. There's nothing left. After the soul achieves liberation, there's nothing left, not even the soul itself. For them, perfection, liberation means to lose any consciousness whatsoever. Not only to lose false ego, but to lose any sense of ego whatsoever. So nirvana means void. Nirvana means nothingness to the Buddhist. But to a bhakti yogi, nirvana means the cessation, ending the process, ending the entanglement of material life. But it does not mean to end activity. It does not mean to end individuality. It means to take that to the transcendental realm. When you're chanting the names of the Lord, you're not gossiping, you're not complaining. When you're eating prasadam, you're not eating bhog, you're not eating nonsense things. When you're serving the Lord, you're not serving Maya. So in all of those activities, chanting, taking prasadam, and serving the Lord, you are in a state of nirvana. You're not creating any more future incarnations. You're not acting in ignorance. You're acting as you would act in the spiritual world. So nirvana to the devotee does not mean the cessation of activities, the cessation of individuality. It does not mean the end of life but it means the end of material life and the actual beginning of your real, eternal, blissful spiritual life. There's no difference between that place we call the kingdom of God and that place wherever there are devotees serving the Lord. That's the geography. Wherever there's Naham Tishnanti Vaikana Yoganam Yata Gantri Madbhakta Yata. The Lord says, I am to be found. And of course, wherever the Lord is, his kingdom is as well. Wherever there are devotees gathered together, singing my names, taking prasadam, and serving me. In the material world, everything is centered around each individual's promotion, self-aggrandizement, sense gratification. But in the spiritual world, the center is only one. It is Krishna and attainment of Krishna consciousness. And for us, this is what it means to become Brahmasthita, situated in Brahman, is to transfer our activities, transfer our desires, our appetites, our aspirations, dovetail our talents and abilities, no longer for our own personal benefit, but in order to honor and to glorify the Lord. When you act in Krishna consciousness, when you act for the satisfaction of Krishna instead of for the satisfaction of your ego, all material desires, anything that would cause you to generate a future material body is checked. It is checked. And those actions and reactions are burned by the fire of devotional service, just as firewood is burned by fire, leaving one free, not only at the time of leaving this body, but even at the present moment, one can be liberated even within this body. Because liberation, by our definition, means to engage in the service of the Lord, to resume that eternal occupational duty which some or other we left a long, long time ago. We'll stop there. It's 8:15. I hope you consider that we've made a good start to this week. What do you take away from this morning, Rob?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. There's a message here that I apparently needed to hear because last night, reading in the Gita, I read chapter 9, verse 4. It talks about that everything is within Krishna, but Krishna is not within everything, materially speaking. He is present in everything spiritually, but not materially. And so to see Krishna in all things, see God in all things, we need to be looking at the spiritual aspect of things. I mean, you don't pick up a rock and say, oh, this is Krishna. It's like, well, it's in Krishna. It is his energy, but to see Krishna within it, you need to be looking at it spiritually.
Exactly. I think I quoted that verse. Mai tatami dam sarvam jigadabe machstani sarvam nachaham teshu vashana 9:4, I believe. The key is the spiritual master. The electrician can take electricity and make hot out of it or make cold out of it. That's his expertise. So all those things which previously had entangled us, once we approach a bona fide spiritual master and serve him and learn from him in a submissive attitude, he takes that same active sense, that same energy, which we used to use in ignorance, in nescience, to cause us further entanglement. He'll take that same energy and he'll redirect it in such a way that now our activities are going to burn up the reactions of our past activities. And we're going to be free to back home, back to Godhead. just like the electricity can make cold or hot. So the spiritual master can take one category of activities and by the proper direction and with the proper illumination, transform our whole lives into lives of freedom and service and liberation. That's the pivotal point, is approaching an experienced, bona fide devotee of the Lord. You agree?
I would definitely agree, Prabhuji. And the other thing,
Yeah, go ahead.
yes, the other thing I really appreciated was the explanation of nirvana. I mean, me personally, I would much rather maintain my consciousness, my spiritual consciousness, and be in the presence of God than to just cease to exist altogether.
In fact, that sentiment that you just expressed is felt by Vaishnavas so strongly that they go so far as to say, Parvananda Saraswati said, Kaivalyam Narakayate. For Vaishnavas, the idea of losing your identity and merging into the Brahman effulgence of the Lord. Do you know what I'm going to say next? Quoting the great Vaishnavacharyas.
I do not, Prabhuji.
Kaivalyam means oneness, Narakayate. Naraka means hell. Not only does a devotee not want that, but they avoid that as you would avoid hell. That is a version of hell for them. Not to be able to serve the Lord, not to be able to love the Lord. And we can't imagine why anybody would set that up as an ideal. It's a lot of trouble, it's a lot of difficulty, and it's like going to a lot of trouble to go to hell, really. Whereas serving the Lord, taking prasadam, enjoying, like we were talking about the sadhu sangha, wherever the sadhu sangha is held this year, whether it be in Spanish Fork or somewhere else, there'll be 2,000 devotees singing and dancing and honoring the Lord, embracing each other, enjoying each other's association, having opulent prasadam. So easy. And the result is you see the Lord face to face. It's like, why would anyone adopt a more difficult process to get a hellish result? To no longer be able to be in service to the Lord. So that's good. Good observation there. Thank you, Jean, for being with us. Brent, John, Malik, and Brent were the first two that jumped on this morning. They heard our earlier announcements. That's the benefit of getting on early. You get the latest, the juice from the spiritual world. Rakesh, please accept my humble obeisances. Glory to Prabhupada. Bye, Bobby. Thank you for joining. Anjali, I hope you were on early and seeing your name there. I made the announcement, which I think would have been exciting for you. Have your prayer, I think the word is, coming over here across the pond, as they say, to precipitate in the Festival of Colors. Anjali came to the Festival of Colors we had in September, and she lent her magnificent singing voice as a backup singer for TK's band and Jai Krishna's band. She intends on coming back again in March to do the same, and she'll have one of her soul brothers, Jake Emlyn, here also. Lakesh has much needed motivation. Thank you for the wonderful class. And what else could be a better start for the day and the week than Motivational Monday? Thank you. Ram Kishore says, devotees gain liberation in this life through chanting the holy names and being the servant of the Lord. Yes. All right. Thank you for joining. Those of you who joined us, thank you, Rob, for being with me on the Zoom call. And thank you to those who are giving all those, it's like hearts and thumbs up and stars, big flurry of that at the end. It encourages me to come back in 23 hours and join with all of you once again for the nectar of Krishna Katha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Rama,